All right, let's dive into some Daoism. We're taking a deep dive into Chapter 7 of the Dao De Jing. And you guys know we always try to bring a real mix of sources.
Yeah, we got some interesting ones for this one.
Definitely. We've got classic interpretations, a lecture from a Dao master, even some analysis that compares Daoism to Western philosophy. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, it's a really rich chapter.
It is. It gets into some big ideas, leadership, selflessness, even some paradoxes that are going to really make you think.
It's going to be fun.
It is. Okay, so every single source we looked at starts with this idea of heaven and earth as these models of, ultimate success. They last for so long, and the reason is they're not self-serving. It's almost the opposite of how we usually think about power, right?
It really is. I mean, we usually associate power with, dominance and self-preservation. But the Dao De Jing flips that on its head and says true power, enduring power, comes from this selflessness, from nurturing and supporting everything around you.
So, heaven and earth are powerful because they just exist. And in existing, they kind of sustain everything else.
Exactly. They don't strive for anything. They don't try to control. They just are. And that's where their power comes from.
It makes you think, though, right? Are we saying that being selfless is the key to lasting success, even in a super competitive world? Because our world is all about competition.
That's the question, isn't it? And that's where things get really interesting, because the Dao De Jing would say, yeah, focusing on serving others, focusing on the well-being of the whole, that actually creates a more stable and harmonious environment. And that's where you can really thrive.
So instead of me first, it's more like we first.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Okay. So how does that work with leadership, though? Because the Dao De Jing talks about this sage, this ideal leader, right? And it says they get to the foremost place by putting themselves last.
Yeah, the sage.
Which just sounds completely backwards.
It does. It's wait, so by not trying to be a leader, I become one.
Right. It's a paradox.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I think that's the point. It's challenging those assumptions we have about leadership, right? Because we think about assertiveness, ambition, all those qualities. Daoism says no. True leadership comes from humility, from selflessness.
The sage doesn't grab for power.
Doesn't seek recognition. They just kind of act in accordance with the Dao, with that natural flow of things.
So they just do what feels right.
Yeah, and by doing that, they naturally attract respect and influence. People follow because it feels right.
So it's not about forcing things or controlling.
Not at all. More like going with the flow, but in a wise and intentional way.
Okay, going with the flow. And that reminds me of Wu Wei, which always trips me up. It's effortless action. What does that even mean? Does it mean being passive?
That's a common misconception. Wu Wei isn't about being passive or just letting things happen. It's more subtle than that.
Yeah.
Think of it like, a really skilled dancer. They move so gracefully, right?
Yeah.
It looks effortless. But there's a ton of intention, a ton of skill behind those movements.
Yeah, years of training.
Exactly. So it's like finding that sweet spot, you know, where action flows naturally, where there's intention, but you're not forcing things.
You're not fighting against the current.
You're moving with it. And that brings us to another really cool idea that the Dao master talked about, this idea of balancing our external and internal selves.
This is where he talks about taking care of our physical body, right?
That's the one.
To be honest, that kind of threw me off. I always thought of Daoism as being all about cultivating that inner world, meditation, mindfulness, all that.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely about cultivating your inner world. But it's bigger than that. Daoism has this holistic view. Our physical and mental well-being, they're connected, can't separate them.
Yeah, I get that.
And the Dao master actually uses this Chinese term, Wei Qi Shen Er Shen Kun.
Okay, say that again.
Wei Qi Shen Er Shen Kun.
All right, I'm going to need you to break that down for me.
I got you. It basically means externalize the body to preserve it.
Okay, still not getting it.
Think about a warrior going into battle. They've got their armor on, right? It's there to protect them. But they don't cling to it as if it's their true self.
It's just a tool.
Exactly. It's a tool, and the warrior's real strength is in their spirit, that inner resolve. So it's about recognizing our physical body is important, but it's not the whole story.
So take care of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. But also remember, you're more than just your physical form.
We are not just our bodies.
Right. We're not just our bodies. We have this whole inner world to cultivate.
And we got to find that balance between the two.
Exactly. Okay, now before we go too far, I'm curious about this idea of private ends that kept popping up in the sources. Can we have personal goals, aspirations if we're trying to be selfless? That's where it gets really paradoxical, right?
Right. Is that allowed?
Daoism doesn't say you have to completely deny yourself or just become like a blank slate.
Okay.
It's more about understanding desire and how it can either trap you or set you free.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this desire thing.
The Dao De Jing says that if we're clinging to our desires, if we're making our happiness depend on achieving those specific outcomes, we're just setting ourselves up for suffering.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right, but if we can learn to detach just a little bit, to hold those desires lightly, we create a space for more peace and freedom.
It's not about denying our desires, it's about changing how we relate to them.
Beautifully put. And that leads us to one of the most mind-blowing parts of this chapter, I think. It's the Dao master's take on achieving goals.
Oh, yeah.
He says that true accomplishment has nothing to do with anything external and everything to do with this intense focus, this laser focus on the thing itself.
Okay.
To the point where you almost lose awareness of yourself.
So you're so focused, you kind of disappear.
You disappear into the task.
Okay, that sounds both terrifying and amazing.
It is. But how does letting go of desire actually help you achieve goals?
Right. That's what I don't get.
Think about it. Think about a time you were completely absorbed in something, you know? Maybe you were creating something or lost in a game.
Or reading a really good book.
Yes, that's it. Where you completely lose track of time, you even forget about yourself. You're just completely present in that moment.
I've had those moments. It's like nothing else exists.
Exactly. And it often feels effortless. There's no striving, no forcing.
Yeah.
Just pure action.
And in those moments, it's like you create your best work.
You're in the flow.
You're in the flow. That's what athletes talk about, being in the zone. Is that what the Dao De Jing's talk about?
I think so. It's that flow state where action becomes effortless and you become one with the task. The Dao master even uses this term, Renjian He, which literally means the unity of the sword and the swordsman.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. I love that image.
Me too. Because it's about that complete immersion, that oneness with the action.
And it all comes back to having a focused mind.
A mind that's not distracted by desires, not bogged down by worries, just completely present in the moment.
Okay, so let go of the mental chatter.
Quiet the mind.
Focus on what's right in front of you.
And that's the key, according to the Dao De Jing, to true mastery.
Okay, wow, this is like a whole new way of thinking about success, about leadership, even about what it means to be a self.
Right. It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. But I know we have a lot more to uncover, so for our listeners, we're going to leave you with this to ponder. How can you apply these ideas, these concepts of selflessness, effortless action, that focused attention? We'll pick this exploration back up in part 2, where we're going to go even deeper into the paradoxes and wisdom of chapter 7 and connect it to even bigger philosophical ideas.
It's going to be good.
It is. See you there.
Welcome back. Hope you had some time to think about all that, especially that whole achieving goals through focus and the absence of desire thing.
Oh, I definitely did. I'm still wrapping my head around it. It feels so counterintuitive, especially with how much our culture values achievement, you know? Like, you gotta strive, gotta hustle, gotta want it.
It really is a different way of thinking, but the Dao De Jing says that's exactly when we open ourselves up to that flow, that effortless action. Remember that sword and swordsman analogy?
Oh yeah, Renjian Hiai. Becoming one with what you're doing.
Right, exactly. It's like when you see a painter totally lost in their art or a musician just completely absorbed in the music.
Or programmer,
right,
coding, you know?
Yeah.
You get so focused that everything else fades away.
Yes. In those moments, it's like there's no separation between you and what you're doing. It's just pure action, flowing effortlessly. And that's where the real mastery comes from.
So it's not about denying you have desires or goals. It's more about how you relate to them.
That's a great way to put it. It's like you can have the destination in mind, but you're not fixated on it. You're open to different paths.
Maybe you even realize that the journey is more important than the destination itself.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to the process, trusting that the Tao, the natural flow of life, will guide you, even if it takes you in unexpected directions.
Okay, I'm starting to get it a little more. But I gotta be honest, letting go of control like that, that's hard. My instinct is to try to control things, you know, to make things happen the way I want them to.
That's totally understandable. It's like we're wired to want to control things, especially in a culture that values ambition and achievement.
It's like, go get them, make it happen. That's the message we hear all the time.
Yeah, it's everywhere. But the Dao De Jing invites us to consider a different way, a way that's more about harmony and balance, aligning yourself with that natural order.
It's funny you should mention balance because that reminds me of what the Tao Master said about taking care of our external A and D internal selves.
Oh, absolutely. It's all connected. And he actually used that Chinese term, remember?
Oh, yeah. The one I couldn't pronounce.
Wei qi shen er shen kun.
You said it.
It's a mouthful, I know. It basically means externalize the body to preserve it.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Still not quite sure what it means in practice.
It's about recognizing that our physical and mental well-being are completely intertwined.
So it's not about neglecting your physical needs for some purely spiritual pursuit.
Not at all. The Dao De Jing recognizes the importance of caring for your body, but it also encourages you to see your body as a vessel, a vessel for something bigger, something that transcends just the physical.
So it's like, yeah, take care of your car, but remember, you're not the car. You're the driver.
Perfect analogy. And that ties back to the idea of selflessness. When we get too caught up in identifying with our physical bodies, with all our ego's desires and fears, it limits our potential for growth and connection.
But when we detach a little, we open ourselves up to a deeper understanding of who we really are.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference.
So we're not just talking about diet and exercise here, but also cultivating a different mindset about our physical selves.
Right. It's about recognizing our true essence lies beyond our physical form.
Wow. It's like the Dao De Jing packs so much wisdom into so few words. It's a puzzle.
It is, but that's what makes it so engaging. It invites you to go deeper, to contemplate, to really experience these ideas, not just think about them.
And, even though it was written centuries ago, it feels so relevant today. I mean,
Yeah.
Think about it. The pressure to succeed, that constant striving, this feeling of disconnection. It's like the Dao De Jing offers an antidote.
It does. It offers a path to a more balanced and harmonious way of being.
The way to find peace amidst the chaos.
Exactly. And that path requires some courage, humility, a willingness to let go of our fixed ideas about how things should be.
It's a challenge for sure.
It is, but it leads to greater peace, greater fulfillment, deeper connection.
I'm seeing that more and more. Okay, but before we get too carried away, we have to talk about all these comparisons to Western philosophy. Existentialism, postmodernism. To be honest, those threw me for a loop.
I know, right? They're pretty mind-bending, but they offer a really fascinating perspective on how Daoism resonates with and challenges Western thought.
So how does Daoism, which is all about harmony and going with the flow, compare to existentialism, which is about individual freedom and responsibility?
Right, it seems like they'd be total opposites.
Like one's about self-creation and the other's about surrendering to something bigger.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But even with those differences, there's some common ground. Both existentialism and Daoism encourage us to question assumptions, to challenge societal norms, to figure out our own authentic way of being.
Okay, I see that. But what about postmodernism? Those sources were dense.
Oh, yeah. Postmodernism is all about deconstructing narratives, questioning fixed identities.
So it's like nothing is fixed, everything's in flux.
Exactly. It embraces ambiguity, rejects the idea that there's just one truth.
So how does that relate to Daoism?
Well, Daoism also emphasizes that interconnectedness, that impermanence of all things. It recognizes that reality is always changing, and it encourages us to embrace that flow instead of trying to control it.
So Daoism and postmodernism both challenge our rigid ways of thinking.
They do. It's like they're both pointing us towards a more nuanced and fluid understanding of ourselves and the world.
Yeah. It's amazing how these ideas from different cultures and time periods can connect like that.
It is. And I think these comparisons can really deepen our understanding of Daoist principles.
They help us see them in a new light.
Exactly. And appreciate how relevant they are to our lives, even today.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this part. Effortless action, balancing our inner and outer selves, the paradox of private ends, and even these mind-bending connections to Western philosophy. Phew. I need a break.
It's a lot. But make sure you come back for part 3, where we're going to get into the practical applications of all this.
We're going to see how to actually live these principles.
Exactly. It's going to be good.
Okay, welcome back to our deep dive on Chapter 7. We've talked about a lot of big ideas, selflessness, effortless action, that whole thing about our inner and outer selves. But now I want to know, how do we actually put this stuff into practice? Like, how does it work in real life?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the philosophy, but then it's like, okay, but what do I do with this?
Right, exactly. I mean, aligning with the Dao sounds great, but how does that help me when I've got a mountain of deadlines, my inbox is exploding, and I'm just constantly stressed?
Well, let's start with that feeling of overwhelm, right? That's something everyone deals with. And remember how the Tao master talked about the connection between our physical and mental well-being?
Yeah, that our physical and mental selves are all connected.
It's not just some abstract concept. He was making a really practical point. When we don't take care of ourselves physically, it shows up mentally and emotionally.
So, like, self-care isn't selfish.
No, it's essential. Getting enough sleep, eating well, moving your body, all those things are not just trends, they're about creating a foundation for balance.
It's like if you want to run a marathon, you need to train, you need fuel.
Exactly, otherwise you're gonna burn out.
And that burnout leads to all sorts of problems. Irritability, bad decisions, can't focus.
It affects everything. So by taking care of yourself, you're actually setting yourself up to handle challenges better.
Okay, so step 1, take care of yourself. Got it. What about those, like, really tricky situations? Dealing with difficult people, competition at work, all that.
That's where Wu-Wei comes in. Effortless action. It's not about being passive.
Yeah, we talked about that.
It's about aligning your actions with the natural flow of things.
Not forcing, not resisting.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, think of a martial artist. They don't meet force with force.
Right, redirect it.
Yeah, they use their opponent's energy to create a more harmonious outcome.
So instead of getting defensive or trying to control every little thing,
You find a way to respond with clarity and intention.
and stay open to whatever happens.
Exactly. You're not attached to a specific outcome.
Okay, that's a good mindset to have. So, like, in a tough situation at work, instead of going head to head, maybe try to understand the other person's perspective.
Find common ground, look for solutions that benefit everyone.
That's hard.
It is, but it's way more effective in the long run.
And it doesn't mean being a pushover or compromising your values.
Not at all. It's about navigating those challenges with grace, with wisdom, and not getting dragged down by the negativity.
It takes a lot of self-awareness, doesn't it?
It does. Recognizing your triggers, choosing a different response.
So self-awareness is another key part of this whole Dao thing.
Absolutely. So understanding yourself, your patterns, so you can make conscious choices.
Okay, take care of yourself, practice Wu Wei, cultivate self-awareness. This is starting to feel less like ancient philosophy and more like a practical toolkit.
It is. And there's one more thing I think is super relevant for, well, pretty much everything in life. That idea of leadership through selflessness.
Oh yeah, the sage who gets to the top by putting themselves last.
That one.
I'm not gonna lie, it still feels a bit crazy. Especially these days when everyone's all about me, me, me.
I know, right? It's like the opposite of what we're told to do.
But the Dao De Jing says true leadership isn't about ego or dominance, it's about serving others, contributing to the good of the whole.
Exactly. It's about leading by example, inspiring and empowering people.
It's about recognizing that real power comes from aligning yourself with a greater purpose, with what's right and true.
Beautifully said. You know, it's amazing to me how all these sources we looked at, the ancient texts, the Dao master's words, even the Western philosophy comparisons, they all point to this one idea.
Finding balance.
Finding balance.
Yeah.
It's finding a more harmonious way of being in the world.
Yeah. And the Dao De Jing shows us that true fulfillment comes from cultivating that inner peace, that alignment with the natural flow of things.
So well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to encourage everyone listening to keep exploring these ideas. Don't just take our word for it. Read the Dao De Jing, see what resonates with you.
Absolutely. This isn't a one-time thing, aligning with the Dao. It's a lifelong journey.
It is a journey of self-discovery and growth.
There will be times when you get off track, you know? You'll lose your balance, get caught up in the chaos.
It happens to all of us.
But the key is to keep coming back to these principles, to keep practicing, to keep trusting the Dao. It's like a compass, always pointing you in the right direction.
That's a perfect way to put it. And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring. And may you find that harmony and balance in your own lives.